Hey guys, Ian at SS8000 Cars, and today we have the drive the BMW X1. Now, the X1 has been around a while, but the previous X1 was very car-like, and today's version is really based upon the off-road vehicles that we know as the X3 and the X5, and you can see it's got a slightly raised stance. Now, previous X1s, in my opinion, have always been a little bit further gap between the arch and the tyre itself, but I think it's accentuated in the new X1. Now, this is the base version, so we've managed to get a petrol, so it's the 1.8i petrol. 1.8 denotes the size of the engine, producing about 150 HP, so it's not a hugely powerful car. But on the other hand, technology, engine petrol technology has come on leaps and bounds. It's very smooth, very sophisticated, very quiet at speed. Doesn't have a huge amount of power, but on the other hand, it's only dragging around 1500 kgs, so that's a significantly useful step from the X3, which is about 1900. So obviously you're going to need a more powerful engine to provide the same level of performance in the X3 than you do in this car. Now, I think it's usefully compact compared to the X3. Obviously we have an X3, so it's quite an interesting one, this, for me in some ways, because this is a petrol variant of an SUV, which up till now BMW have really not provided in the X3. This model X3, the latest, does have a petrol variant, but up when we were choosing ours, which was 6-7 years ago, it was diesel only. So, as is the way with BMW now, they've enlarged the front grille, really making a statement. I don't know whether any of you have seen the latest 7 Series, which came out very recently, but the grille is huge. So the car has full adaptive LED lights, as you can see. Everything about the car really is modern generation technology, as you'd really expect, because this was only introduced last year, this car. The particular one has 18-inch alloys, and I think it's got the design package because it has the silver enhancements down where you'd normally find a front splitter, and along the sides where you have the side skirts, and again at the back as well. But otherwise it is just a compact SUV, but I rather like the look of it. Now, I don't like everything about it, so we'll come to that in a minute, but overall I think from a styling viewpoint it's a very cohesive design, and it looks very updated. It's different enough from the previous X1, and now follows the family trait of the X3 and the new X5. So if we come over to the inside, quite modern and beautifully made, it has to be said. It is well put together. Now, it is usefully smaller than the X3. So I have a test that when I sit in the driver's seat and I put my hand outstretched, how close am I to the door? Now, of course, a bit difficult for you to see this, but it's within about 1.5 inches of the door when the door is closed. Whereas in the X3, we're talking about 3-4 inches. So it's usefully narrower, but it doesn't feel too bad. You still feel like there's a distance between you and the passenger. This doesn't have sports seats. These are the standard seats. Don't like them as much as the sports seats, but the sports seats can be specified on the car. And it's a sort of a new design for the center console. Not so sure about that. I mean, I know there is a trend in SUVs, especially these days, to have everything towards the driver in some way. So you have this sort of panel here between the passenger and the primary components, but I don't personally think that's necessary. I prefer what we have in the X3, and I really don't like this trend of all manufacturers of putting fixed binnacles on top of the dashboard. One of the things that manufacturers are going to have to get used to is they cannot keep up with the technology that is available on mobile phones, on these fixed communications infotainment systems that we have in the central part of the the dashboard of every car. The reality is you need to be able to clip your phone in there. If we take Kara's iPhone, which is the generation 8 I believe, and we put it here, as you can see it is a little bit smaller than the central screen, but as you'll see when I start the car, actually the central screen doesn't use all of the width, and it's, I don't know whether you can see, the camera can see that, but it's actually laid out to here. Now whether or not you can specify a larger center infotainment system, I don't know, but I really do think we're getting to the stage with the current generation phones where the display on the phone is very nearly the same as this, and it's really only if you go to the sort of sophistication of the Panamera where you have a huge screen in the center of the dash, but that is also integrated into the dash instead of sticking up like this. I've no idea who thought that was a good design idea. So start the engine as usual. You need to make sure the keys are in the car, and here you have, and you can set up a profile for each driver or guest, but I mean this is pretty standard stuff. That is effectively the maximum amount of the screen that you're actually allowed to have. BMW have gone back to twin dials in front of the steering wheel, and petrol levels are on the speedometer, and then really just an MPG reading to let you know how much petrol you have. I'm not quite sure why they do that, because it's easy enough on here to be able to select what petrol consumption you're getting at any particular time. But I think overall it is nice and roomy. The basic, this is obviously a fully automatic gearbox and converter gearbox, and it's the same as the X3 in many respects. All the controls operate in the same way, and then we have the central, it's not really a mouse, but the central controller here, which allows you to set, in this case, what the definition of the map is. But you can go into menu and scroll through whatever it is that you want. And it's actually quite intuitive, actually, I have to say. Find it quite easy to use. Technology in action, sport displays. You know, there's quite a bit of information here. Although why you'd be particularly interested in that in an X1, I'm not sure. Certainly in perhaps one of the new Mercedes AMGs, could kick out over 500 brake. I think probably that would be more interesting, but you have this sort of information available. Let me switch it off. We'll concentrate a little bit more on usability of the cabin. So two little well, not really glove compartments, but center console compartments here. For small drinks, I would say, probably not too big, and then another compartment in front for putting your house keys or whatever it is you want. So got a couple of covers over that. Again, I explained you've got your parking brake, and then you can ignore having to scroll through the system here to go into sport or eco on both the chassis and the powertrain here, which I mean, you know, I think in a car like this, again, you probably set it in comfort, and unless you're doing something particular, you'll leave it in comfort, I'd rather imagine. But it's quite a nice place to be. Now, one of the things that they have done is they've lowered the dash. Now, I said when we tested the Range Rover Velar about a year ago that one of the things I noticed was it had a quite low dash. Now, my wife actually quite likes that, because she says she gets a better view out. So you can see the steering wheel and the front binnacle and the infotainment center are all lower than they were in the previous car, and certainly lower than in the X3. And you do get a better view out the front, but it doesn't make you feel quite so snug. Now, one of the things I love about the Panamera when I'm driving it is I always feel really sporty, because I sit low in the Panamera and everything around me is quite high, and it really feels snug. This sort of feels like you're perched on top of the cabin, which, yeah, it probably does give you slightly better forward visibility, but overall I slightly prefer it the way we have it in the X3, and certainly the way that it's presented in the in the Panamera. All the light controls on the right hand side as you'd expect. Then you have a glove compartment, you have a glove compartment here, pardon me, no gloves in it, you note, and just a sort of a space underneath the armrest. But then you also have a nice sort of binnacle there. You can chuck stuff in. You can see I've got the keys, and then this ratchets up, and it's nice and comfortable to lean your elbow on. I mean, yeah, overall I'd be positive about it. I mean, just for me, I slightly prefer a slightly higher dash. And then if we move over to the back, this is the amazing thing about this car. It really isn't very big, this car. I mean, it's quite compact from a length viewpoint. Look how much room, and I'm 6 foot. Look how much room I've got here. And my headroom's not restricted either. Now, I suppose in some ways you'd expect that, because SUVs are meant to be nice and practical and spacious, but I think that's really, really good legroom. Now, we picked up the guys from Heathrow, and there were 5 of us plus 4 people's luggage, and not a whole load of luggage, but nevertheless we got everybody in comfortably, and we got home nice and comfortably. So I was impressed with that. Obviously the center armrest goes up into its slot, but this is comfy. You know, I really think it's quite a nice place to be. And again, I suppose because that front screen is longer, you actually get quite a nice airy feeling in the back of the car. So a plus point for BMW there, and again, everything is nicely put together. It's just, you can feel that it'll last 100,000, 200,000 miles, and still, if you keep it well, still be in good condition at the end of that. I don't know whether this is standard electric tailgate, but nevertheless, we have it on this car. It's not a bad size. We had 3 sort of compact cases in there, plus 2 rucksacks, and there was room. You know, we were able to shut the boot, and I didn't have to take the parcel shelf out, which I quite like. And then underneath here, in the way of no spares these days, you have quite a large area underneath the boot, where you could hide away quite a lot of other stuff. And in fact, actually, if I thought about it, I could have probably put a case in there yesterday. That's just a very nice machine. And again, to close the boot, we just push the button. I mean, I know that's not uncommon today, but it did slightly surprise me that if it's standard on a bottom level X1. This car costs £26,850 at base level. Now, you probably get some discount off that if you were buying new, but that's not bad. In this market, that's not bad. I mean, you easily get a Golf up to that sort of level with a few extras. Obviously, there are no extras on that for that money. The thing about this model, as I alluded to earlier, it's the S-Drive model, and you'd think that BMW have always been rear-wheel drive, so if it wasn't four-wheel drive it would be rear-wheel drive, but it's not. These cars now are front-wheel drive, and I rather suspect that the drivetrain is taken from their MPV type models, the 2 Series that they brought out, which look like an SUV, but they're not an SUV, and they're all front-wheel drive. Overall, a very cohesive design. This one's got privacy glass. Quite like that, makes it look more modern. But it's a very compact car. I mean, that I think is the final point that I'd like to make. It's just short. It doesn't feel big to drive. It feels very car-like to drive. It takes plenty of people. It's got a good luggage space. I think you may well be able to get it with 7 seats, which is remarkable on a little car like this, although obviously you wouldn't have very much boot capacity with 7 people in it. But it's just making it versatile. Alright guys, well, I hope that gives you a good impression of the new X1. It's Ian from SS8000 Cars signing off.